Could we call roll?
Chair Bernstein, Vice Chair Bauer,
Here.
Board Member Corey,
Here.
Board Member Benenberg,
Here.
Board Member Kohler, Board Member Makinen,
Here.
Board Member Wimmer, Council Member Holman. 6 present with Council Member Holman, makes 7.
Thank you. So first order of business is the meeting schedule. I don't think there's any change in that. I'm disappointed we're not meeting on Thanksgiving Day.
Well, it's maybe not too late to send out a notice if you really, are
I don't know.
sorely disappointed.
I don't have a pass to get in the building.
But it will be a subcommittee meeting of you and someone else.
Oh, I see. And the December 28th meeting looks real? That's the week between Christmas? You think?
December 28th will be canceled.
Okay. So we have, after today, we'll have one meeting on the 14th of December if you have.
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, next. So we have 2 study sessions up today. First is the, either, it doesn't matter which one. On the agenda, the first one is the new historic preservation website, and the second item under that heading would be the Eichler Design Guidelines update. We can do those in that order if you want, or we could do them in reverse order since Page and Turnbull representative is here, and then you could get on with your day.
We're voting on the presentation now, so I think.
Fine, let's do the website then.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And this shouldn't take too long. I just wanted to bring to your attention the new historic preservation website for the city of Palo Alto. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the old one, which was just one kind of big page full of text. But now when you navigate to the city's historic preservation page, you'll be confronted with you'll immediately notice some changes. So the older website was a little confusing, and the information while there wasn't very readily available, and you had to kind of parse through it. So here, my goal was to get the information as clear and accessible as possible while highlighting some of the success stories of our program, as well as incentives and the design review process loud and clear, since those are the questions I get most asked. So when you start off, the homepage is now a nice big welcome sign, a lovely GIF of some of our beautiful buildings. You'll find information, news and updates, some success stories about Sanford Theater, Women's Club, and our contact information. So what I want to share with you today, though, are these new pages that we have created. So the first one being project review. This is going to be, this is where anyone who has any questions about what they can and can't do with their home, they'll find all that information here. This is a very useful resource for us at the city. The next page are our preservation incentives that we offer historic property owners. So this is something that the public is very interested in, and here we have all of that clearly laid out, easily digestible. It just goes on and on. Okay. We also have a new page devoted to the historic registers. So we have our local, California, and national register, as well as explaining what those mean, what the criteria are, what is a Category 1, what is a Category 2. Here it's all laid out nice and clearly. And we have pictures and the inventories loaded up of every single National Register individually listed building, so people can come and actually read those nominations. There's a nice little picture. Okay, we'll go back up. We now also have a page devoted to our historic districts and the historic surveys that have occurred in Palo Alto. So we have our Professorville, Ramona, and links to the nominations themselves, as well as guidelines for Professorville, and further information, further reading, linking to past, for example, some of their information. And then for the surveys, we talk about the 1979 survey, and have some nice images that came out of that, as well as the Dames and Moore and some of their context summaries that they put together. So there's that information is now readily available. It's up. Anyone can come and read that and learn about the history and all the work that went into those. The final page we put together is an actual history of Palo Alto. This was written by Steve Steiger, our resident historian, and so we actually have a nice summary of the history here in Palo Alto. And at the bottom, this will be of interest to all of you on the HRB. It's every historic preservation resource online you could possibly want. So we have all of our city resources as well as county, Bay Area, state, and national. So you'll find information about the OHP, the CLG program, historic building codes, etc. And so that's it. I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of our new site. I encourage you to look it over and provide any feedback if something's missing, if you want to include some more information, or if you see something that you'd like to change or to add on to. I'd appreciate it.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there a link to the Professorville guidelines, and then there will be an eventual link to the
Yep.
Eichler guidelines?
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
we here, I'll just bring this up since we're here. We do have our Eichler page. So there will be a link to the Eichler guidelines on the district page, as well as here's our Eichler neighborhood design guidelines page. So this has been being updated as we're going along with an updated schedule. There's the pictures from the last event, the memory event was fun. Yeah, I've already updated, or to the best way I could. So yeah, so the updated schedule and the draft guidelines will go up here as well as the final. Yeah.
So where would I, as a homeowner, find the 2,000 Danes and more information?
So that's a great question, because I tried to build this as if I'm not a preservationist. I'm just a homeowner. I'm just a citizen of Palo Alto, and I come to this, front page, and I read, and I see something that says here, historic districts and historic resources surveys. So I assume I would click that, and I would scroll to the bottom where we have our survey section, and here's the Dames and More section, and I can't read it, but it's one of these links that you would click, probably that one.
So I'm following you on my computer here.
Okay.
So you go down to the bottom where there are all these boxes. It's in final survey report?
Yep. So the final survey report, as well as a summary, is uploaded. It might take a while to upload because it's very big, but it's coming.
Yeah, very big.
So I thought these were very interesting. These are the context summaries that Dames and More put together on something like 46 topics, unique topics to Palo Alto. While they're not interactive at this point, it gives you an idea. You say, oh, I want to read about Leslie Nichols. I can go into the final report and read about him.
Is it,
Or her.
the first thing I did when I saw those boxes, I thought, great, click on them.
Right. So we are still originally you could click on these and you would get a nice big picture I love these drawings from the 1979 survey. It's still a work in progress. You'll notice at the top of our website, it'll say, thank you, we're still working out bugs till November 30th.
It's been there, what, 20 years?
No, we just got them. Brand new. So I'm still going to be working on getting these. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, this is a fabulous arrangement of information. It's a huge amount. I think it might be a little intimidating for, your average resident because there's so much here, but at least it's here. At least it's accessible.
Well, I'm hoping.
But they can call you, Emily, if they
Yes.
have questions.
They can send them right to me. I think that what people are mostly going to be looking for, though, are the links about the HRB meetings, the project review, and preservation incentives that we offer. But it's very
Sure.
nice to have all that other information just available and accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I assume it's a kind of dual level approach to this information. There'll be the professionals who need to have the information, like Martin, Roger, Margaret, and need to be in the weeds here, and then there'll be the homeowners who are interested in the general overview of what historic preservation means for their properties. Well, I think this is a huge improvement. Thank you for, anyone have comments? Okay, let's move on to.
I was going to say, I think it's great overall. The one thing that I did find, though, that I had trouble searching for it, so if you search for historic preservation, it actually didn't come up. You had to navigate through, so maybe that's just something we, so if you go to the main page and if you go to like the search box and you search for historic preservation, that page doesn't come up.
Right, you have to.
So probably worth.
That is very good to know, thank you.
Yeah, you have to do that through Google, and when you do that, then you get right to the page.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but the search box at the top just didn't come up. So that's, I mean, I assume it's
Yeah.
easy to fix, but.
Thank you. There might be other such errors. You know, we've had a overhaul of our whole website, not just these pages, and went to a different system. And so that's why it took so long to actually launch all the work that Emily and our intern did this summer. We've had to wait for the new regime of website. Yeah.
Overall, though, it looks fantastic. It's great, so.
Councilman Holman?
Yeah, I had a couple of observations I'd made earlier too, which is when you click on, well, when you're on the home page. You want to use this? You want to go back to the home page? Yeah. So it's, the last bullet here is a little confusing. It looks like it's the listing for all of them, and and at the same time, there's one earlier, which is also Palo Alto listed properties. So I think people might find that confusing, why they're both there.
Well, so when you click on the Palo Alto listed properties, it's literally just the PDF of all of the properties that are listed.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just the inventory.
It's just, it's
not the
a,
Cal Register ones.
Right.
Which are different from the inventory.
Yeah, I think it might be, if there's a way to differentiate those, like on the subject, because, I don't know, it might be a little bit confusing. The other thing I noticed was when you do go to the link that is the Palo Alto Inventory, California Register and such, when it lists the benefits, it does here. I know I saw it earlier, so somewhere. I know I wasn't that sleepy when I was looking at this earlier.
benefits of listing on the National Register?
Yeah, don't know why I'm not finding it here. But two things. One is it doesn't list the State Historic Building Code, either there for national or local, or so it seems like that would be an important thing to have on there. It's mentioned somewhere else, but it's not mentioned here under benefits.
Okay.
And the other question I had was from the Dames and Moore report or survey, there were some. There was a conclusion drawn of how many of those and which of those were actually eligible for the National Register, and I couldn't tell if looking at this that any of those houses had been added to this list.
No, so these are the actual individually listed. A nomination was prepared, sent to NPS, and there's only 16 of those. The other ones have been deemed eligible, but they're not actually listed.
And where would one find those that are eligible for the National Register? So it seemed like it would be important for the planning department as well as the building department.
Yeah, so those are listed in our internal GIS as well as on, if you go to a parcel report, you'll see that it says it's been deemed eligible. So that's one way.
Excuse me.
I believe it might be in the summary report, but maybe probably not. I don't think there's an actual list of all of the ones that were deemed eligible out of that report.
Is there a reason not to have them on the website? I mean, somebody might want to know that, hey, my property is eligible for the National Register.
There's no reason to not put them up. I can put them up in that section. There's another part on how to, is your property historic, and you go to the parcel report, and it links to the parcel report. You put in your address, and it'll tell you if it's considered a historic resource by the city.
Okay. I concur with the comments that have been made up here. It's like, this is a huge, huge, huge improvement, and this woman to my right is a great asset in addition to the city staff.
You bet. So I just finished loading that. It's a huge file, but what I was looking for were the individual reports that Councilwoman Holman has just been talking about. And I was hoping to see those up here because I think those are really valuable, especially the 200 that are potentially eligible for listing. All of them, I scanned all those in and had a fabulous time looking at the inventory and think it would be a really valuable resource. By the way, at the end, there's a note here that says the DPR 523 records. I have no idea what that is, but... What's that?
Department of Parks and Recreation.
Oh, Department of Parks and Recreation. There are 291 individual properties evaluated in the survey may be found at the Guy Miller Archives, City Palo Library. Not here, but somewhere else, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, link to that might.
Yeah, that'd be great. And this is wonderful feedback. Since you guys are going to be using this probably a lot more than most people. So
Yeah.
again, if you have any other comments, feel free to just send them to me and let me know.
For the 11 years that I've been on 10 years that I've been on the Historic Resources Board, we've never had this much information put on the website. So this is a huge step forward. Roger, you had a comment?
Oh, so we haven't put those up yet, but that will, the place to
official.
find those will be on the Eichler, the special Eichler page. We'll have the draft guidelines available for public to download.
Okay, Councilor Karen.
Is there somewhere, I haven't looked at this thoroughly, but if I have,
Well, that's the next
Come,
item.
it's our next item,
okay.
Karen.
So back to the website. This is, you've been so busy and doing so many great things. And I am wondering if this information is going to be disseminated to the realty community so they can use it as a resource for clients. It's great information. And I concur with David, by the way, that the buttons that you have listed, I think would just be remarkably interesting for pretty much anybody. And having those as hot links would be terrific when you get to it.
Yeah, that's the kind of the end goal is to have a little with the information, because they're nice little essays, a page or two to have that information. That's the end goal for sure. And yes, it would be good to get this information to different communities. So we can work on that certainly.
Got one comment.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I think it was an excellent project right here that you undertook. One comment I had, that it's not anything to do with the way you organize it, but the categories 3 and 4, it leaves one wondering what the differentiation is. Maybe we should address that at this point, because it goes to 3 and 4. Why do we have a 3 and 4 then if there's no differentiation? It's just 3, I don't know. I think we should put some flesh on that. It would probably be helpful, in addition to that, if we had some type of definition of any of the terms that are kind of strange to somebody who's looking at here, like a glossary or something that they can go to and quickly find out what a term is in the back. I think that would be very helpful for a novice who's looking at this, so that they don't get confused.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and that's something we can easily put together.
Put it up.
Yeah.
It's an additional item. Okay.
All right. If there are no other comments, we can move on to the next item, which is the Eichler Design Guidelines Review.
Thank you. We have today Christine Dykes of Page and Turnbull, and she is here to present a PowerPoint on the Eichler Design Guidelines for neighborhoods. We have been at this project for a while. We got approval last December, the 2016, to hire our consultant to work on these. And we, as of yesterday, we have the guidelines in draft form that we're intending to send through an e-blast today to the stakeholders who have been following this, as well as upload them on our webpage. So you are the first in the community to see, everyone in this table, in this room, the hard copy of the guidelines. So I'll let Christina take it away. So on the screen, wait, let's, is that how you do it? I can't see that. They used to be down here to make it bigger.
Can you just pull that sidebar over?
What is it?
If you see the little arrow at the side
Here?
of the, no, up at the,
Oh, here,
right
Rudy.
side?
Here. What is that?
Oh,
There we
there
go.
you
Phew. Okay, I'll drive on this one. Okay, technical difficulties. So we have had new two-story homes in Palo Alto have been subject to the individual review guidelines and individual review program or process. These have included homes in Eichler neighborhoods that did not have a single-story overlay. And new one-story homes in these neighborhoods and elsewhere do not have any kind of design review process. They are just simply a building permit. We've had a concern for lack of compatibility in the Eichler neighborhoods, and that has led to some neighborhoods coming forward to elect to place a single-story overlay on their neighborhoods to at least keep the homes one-story and compatible in that way. But there are no guidelines in place to help architects and homeowners to see how to sensitively add to an Eichler or a replacement building that would be compatible with the homes in the tract. So I already noted that the council approved this contract to go forward with Eichler design guidelines. These are not regulatory. These are tools. So as noted, we have the single-story overlay applicable to some Eichler neighborhoods and one non-Eichler neighborhood that is looking sort of Eichler-like. And then we have, I call them Eichlers or Leiklers, I think is another term. And then we have we also have flood zones, and this is not a tool, it's more of a, there's in the code, the zoning code for R1 neighborhoods, a new home in a flood zone can be taller than other homes because the first finished floor needs to be taller. So in an Eichler neighborhood, that you're already starting much higher than other homes that are slab on grade in the tract. We also have the accessory dwelling unit legislation that came through this year, and the city adopted local guidelines that are helpful. These Eichler guidelines also address accessory dwelling unit guidelines. So, and then as you know, we have two historic districts, National Register historic districts. They're not listed on the city's inventory, so they don't come before this board. They are historic, and so we have a chance to look at those to make sure they're compatible with Secretary of Interior standards. Some neighborhoods have covenants, codes, and restrictions, and we know of 3 neighborhoods that have architectural control committees. So in those neighborhoods, there has been another layer that is a private matter that helps with maintenance of one-story homes in those neighborhoods. It's not, those architectural control committees don't have all the tools they need. Obviously, the enforcement is very difficult, and they do have issues in those neighborhoods as well. So the goals of the guidelines, do you want to do this one?
Sure. Yeah. The goals of this document is to develop illustrated guidelines for preserving the distinctive character of the Eichler neighborhoods in Palo Alto, to provide a design tool for homeowners and architects, to adopt as a reference for Palo Alto review bodies. And in addition to this document, we are exploring with the city the possibility of establishing an Eichler overlay or other regulatory updates where specific standards would apply in lieu of or in addition to the existing single-story overlay and individual review guidelines. So that's something that we're exploring and will discuss more in the future. Next slide is our calendar and where we are today. We have this informational hearing. We'll be coming back to you on December 14th to hear your comments. So you have a good month or more to really dive into this document, and we certainly recommend, or we certainly welcome any comments that you have. Yes, that document.
Could I stop you right there for a second? I see that the Planning and Transportation Commission is going to get this document on the 13th of December, and then we'll look at it the following day. What's Planning and Transportation going to do with this if we haven't yet reviewed it and approved it to move forward?
Right, so this will be their first look at it, and we are, going to describe the fact that we are also looking at potential code changes. Certainly one of the code changes is necessary, and that is to reference these guidelines, as well as a cleanup item to reference the Professorville guidelines, because the code does not do that right now. So it's about the zoning code changes that are necessary and potential zoning code changes that we would return to them after council provides directions on, some of these things. So it's a conversation, and the guidelines, they can recommend adoption of those guidelines on that night, just as you can the next day. I hear what you're saying. You would rather maybe have the Planning Commission go after the HRB to hear what the HRB's comments are on the guidelines.
Right. So that's why I bring this up. It seems to me that the process is backwards here. Planning and Transportation has a legitimate role here, but they ought to hear from us first, because we're the board that actually has expertise in historic issues. And I think that this is what happens with the ARB frequently, that they're making their decisions separate from our input.
Sure.
Sometimes they just ignore our input, which I think is inappropriate. But so
we could just do a study session to talk with them, and or cancel that one. It's a difficulty of holiday agendas.
Sure.
So the next time we could come to them is in late January.
I think it would be more informative for the Planning and Transportation commissioners to actually hear from us first. I mean, hear what we have to say about it. So I would, and since I didn't see them on this timeline later, that's why I'm interrupting and bringing this up. So.
Well, they would certainly be later if and when the council were to direct zoning code changes. Then that would be, a more important meeting from their standpoint. This is more of a have a look at these and,
Okay, so that's fine. Now I understand this is more like a study session for them, and then the following day we will actually review these for substance and recommended changes. Okay, sorry, I apologize for interrupting.
Okay. So we are targeting a public review period that starts today. The document will be put on the website later today, and ending in mid-January. So the general public will have a good 2 months to review.
Where would we find how to get to that site? Is that under our?
We will, as Emily showed you earlier, there's the Eichler guidelines dedicated website. It will be placed there, and certainly we will send a link to the HRB and others that are stakeholders in this that have been following all this, and they'll get the link that will make it easy for them to click on.
Good, because I just have at least one, maybe two people who are very interested in that, so good, thank you.
And we have a listserv of contact information from people who have been attending the community meetings that we've held throughout the year, and others who are interested community members. So there will be an e-blast with all the information, so people can take a look. So we're targeting an April completion, hopefully. Next slide. So the next slides I'm going to present to you are just a quick overview so that you can get a sense of what the design guidelines are, and then again you have a good amount of time to really read them fully before we come back to you. But This is the table of contents, and I'll be going through each of these chapters in subsequent slides. But we have an introduction, a brief history of Eichler homes and Eichler residential development in Palo Alto. That also includes a section on character-defining features of different styles of Eichler homes. Chapter 3 is an overview of community values and concerns. And then we get into the guidelines. We have Chapter 4, Guidelines on Maintaining Eichler Homes, Guidelines for Architectural Compatibility and Neighborhood Cohesion. So this includes new additions to existing Eichler residences and new construction within Eichler neighborhoods. Chapter 6 is Guidelines on Shared Landscape, Streetscape, and a Sense of Nature. We kind of weave through these chapters some of those values and concerns that we heard from community members earlier this year. So that's where the sense of nature comes in. And then Chapter 7 is special considerations. We have a special section on the 2 historic districts, and then we have a section on accessory dwelling units. And I will mention that the only true historic resources are the buildings that are contributors to the 2 National Register historic districts, and so that is the only section of this that really uses the Secretary of the Interior standards, and basically says that if you're a contributor to one of those 2 historic districts, ideally you would have a higher bar for any alterations that you may make. So there's a certain amount of flexibility that's provided in the rest of the design guidelines that are not preservation guidelines per se, but loosely follow our Secretary of the Interior standards. There's just a little bit more flexibility there. So I just want to make that clear. Next slide. So these are our Eichler tracts. Palo Alto has the most Eichlers, I think, of any city, of 11,000 Eichler houses that were developed by Eichler Homes. There are over 2,500 in Palo Alto. So we have found 31 tracts of Eichlers, and you can see that the 2 National Register historic districts are in green. This information was really derived from efforts that Page and Turnbull put into trying to identify the specific Eichler tracts. There's a Google document that was online. We're not sure who developed it. It's kind of an open source map of Eichler tracts, but it wasn't complete. So we also went to the county. We were able to get tract maps. And then we went out and we drove every single street in these areas to really define, is this an Eichler? Is this a Leichler? So we could identify these boundaries. So we hope that this is quite accurate. There are some possibilities that there are tiny pockets of a couple of Eichlers here and there that aren't represented in this map, but this is pretty thorough. This is part of the first chapter, the introduction. We include that map, and then we have a section on how to use these design guidelines. So there is an overarching concept, and if you're familiar with the Professorville design guidelines that we produced last year, similar kind of format. We have a statement explaining the objective or general approaches. And then we have clarifying bullets that follow. And when applicable, we have some sidebars with links. Chapter 2 includes a brief history of Eichler homes. These are just some of the images that we include. If you're not familiar, Joseph Eichler started Eichler Homes in 1949, and the first Eichler tract that was developed in Palo Alto was University Gardens in 1950. It's interesting to see how some of the Eichler designs change over time. He had a contractor who worked on this first tract, and it's a little different. It has these brick fireplace chimneys that are prominent on the front facade, which you don't see in later ones. But later on, he had several well-known and highly reputable mid-century modern architects who worked with him. So one of them is Anshin and Allen out of San Francisco. They did the Fairmeadow tract and a number of others, but this is an example of theirs. Jones and Emmons, A. Quincy Jones, designed Green Meadow in 1954 to 55. And next slide. Claude Oakland worked on some of the later Eichler tracks. An example is the Los Arboles edition number 2, 1974, which are really interesting with this center gable roof. Yes, chapter 2, in much more detail. We also discuss a general history about Joseph Eichler's concept for affordable yet modern design in the post-war period. So this is an example of an advertisement that was made at the time. Next slide. And then just some of the interesting neighborhood layouts. We talk a little bit about the Green Meadow Community Center. Again, that was Jones and Emmons. And then the community center landscape was also done by Thomas Church, who is a very well-known mid-century landscape architect. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this chapter not only includes a history of Eichlers, but also the character-defining features. We've broken them down into different typologies of Eichlers. So this is straight out of the document. This is a front gable Eichler, and we have some illustrations that pull out into bullet points of some features that can be identified with some additional character-defining features over on the side in bullet points. Uh-oh. I lost my page. There we go. Flat-roofed Eichlers with these interesting tall and narrow windows on the front. Next slide. There's a flat with shed roof version, and we have a series of photos, variety. I love the one at the bottom right with the yellow car in the driveway as well. And then the last one that we have is this flat with gable roof. And there are variations of it that you can see in the photos below the main one, with a side gable, a kind of flat, truncated roof gable. And those are the ones from Claude Oakland from the 1970s. And then chapter 3, as I mentioned earlier, there's an overview of the community values and concerns. We hosted 2 community meetings in the spring. One was a general community meeting where we introduced this project, and the other one was specifically for the 2 National Register districts to find out if they had any specific concerns or comments that they wanted to provide us. And we heard from people that not everybody was able to attend these meetings. So we took the questions that we had posed in the meetings and we posted them online in a SurveyMonkey link. So we ended up receiving, I don't remember how many, hundreds of comments from the community. And we documented all of those and we distilled them down into these 6 general concepts of comments that we received. And so in this chapter, we summarize what we heard from the community, and then we try to weave those through the guidelines that are in the following chapters. So this is kind of an interesting approach, something that we haven't had in other design guidelines that we've produced for Professor Bill or for other cities, just because we really wanted to use all of this commentary that we received from the community. So this page just kind of illustrates the first 3 topics: a sense of community, a shared landscape, streetscape, and sense of nature, and valuing privacy. And this is a quote from one of the community members. Eichler owners and residents are very social with each other. Members of our Eichler neighborhood meet twice a year for block parties, twice a year for solstice parties, monthly for book clubs, and daily for informal chat sessions. I have never lived in a place where the neighbors are more tightly connected and welcoming. So that is a comment that we received and categorized into that sense of community value. Next slide. You're already on. And then the last 3 are comments about the modern architectural style, concerns or comments about architectural compatibility with new construction in the neighborhood or other changes, and valuing neighborhood cohesion. So one comment about the architectural style was this quote here. Somebody mentioned a uniquely California modern indigenous style. The fifth community value and concern involved adaptability. I think we also discussed the need for upgrades and sometimes some difficulties that Eichler homes present for upgrades. And then lastly, those who do value preservation. There are a lot of different opinions about Eichler. Some people love them, some people don't care so much for them. So we tried to be objective in that chapter, but just kind of report back what we heard. All right, and these next slides are just a few examples of guidelines that we have in each of the chapters, just so you get a little sense of that. So chapter 4 is on maintaining Eichler homes. A couple examples of the guidelines are to maintain and replace windows while respecting the design characteristics of Eichler homes. We have illustrations that show that you should really try to maintain those large plate glass expanses versus inserting windows with lots of divisions. And to treat entry doors and garage doors in a manner that maintains the patterns found in Eichler neighborhoods. So we have a yes on solid front doors, preferably, and garage doors that have a cladding that's similar to the wall cladding of the rest of the house versus the kind of modern or contemporary garage doors and front doors that you may see. As I mentioned, with the National Register Historic Districts, we use more of the Secretary of the Interior standards, so this is a little bit looser guideline, preferable to keep what you see in your neighbors. Chapter 5 involves architectural compatibility and neighborhood cohesion. This is where we talk about additions, one-story additions and two-story additions. So 5.2.1 discusses placing a new residence, so new construction, within its lot so that it conforms to the streetscape pattern of the surrounding neighborhood. And then we have bullet points that follow with more detail. And 5.2.2, to develop a new house design with an appropriate massing and height that blends well with the surrounding neighborhood. So there's a no on that bottom graphic. And then chapter 6 involves landscape. 6.3.1 is an example to place fences and other boundary
Could I ask
features.
a quick question? Just on this page you just went through showing the good and bad, and then the X.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, where do you,
What page are you
well,
on?
I'm having a hard time figuring out what
It's over
page we're
here,
on.
up in the
but
upper right
I know,
corner.
it's 84. We just went
Okay,
by that.
hold on.
I'm just curious, is there anywhere you talk about one-story versus two-story? Did I miss that?
Yes, we have guidelines that are specific to one-story additions, and then we have guidelines that are specific to two-story additions. And we also have guidelines on new buildings, whether one or two-story.
In this?
In the document, yes. This presentation is really just quick highlights, a couple of
yeah.
examples.
Okay, I just wanted to figure out where we were here. Okay, thank you.
So chapter 6 on landscape, just a couple of examples that we've provided are to place fences and other boundary features where they will not obstruct views of an Eichler residence.
Sorry to interrupt again, but in this case, it might be great on this big green page to have a 6, because you have to look in here to figure out where you are.
Okay, thank you. Keep that in mind.
That's what's confusing. I go come to, okay, all right, thank you.
So we have some check marks on examples that have front yards that do have fences, but they're semi-permeable or are set back close to the house versus all the way at the front of the street where the entire front yard would be blocked off, and that's not recommended. Chapter 7, this is that special considerations chapter on the National Register, Historic Districts, and ADUs. This is an example of one of the ADU guidelines to design detached ADUs with as low a height and roof slope as possible in order to reduce the building's visibility from surrounding residences. So the ADU topic is interesting because because of the state legislation, they are allowed, even though in Eichler neighborhoods, the backyards are very important because that's where the full window walls occur. So we've tried to provide some guidelines generally to place ADUs that might be built in appropriate places and try to minimize their mass as much as possible. And then our chapter 8 involves process improvement suggestions. This chapter is a bit of a work in progress. Part of it relates to these regulatory changes that we're still exploring. So there's actually a placeholder right now where a matrix may end up being inserted. But it discusses some of our recommendations for project review for the National Register Historic Districts, design review training and raising awareness of the neighborhood architectural control committees, designation of additional National Register Historic Districts we recommend. We found that when we were driving around, there were actually a couple of tracks that we noticed that had perhaps even higher integrity than at least one of the National Register districts. So there are certainly others out there that could be eligible for similar reasons. And then again, this potential modification to zoning code related to Eichler neighborhoods. We currently have some of the background information about what we're exploring, but not really the meat of those recommendations yet. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you for running through that for us. I have some comments, but anyone else want to start? Okay. Well,
I was just going to ask, once we have a chance to review the document, how do we, if we see suggestions and things like that, how are we going to just go at a future meeting and each individual person make their suggestions? Or how would you like to receive comments, I guess is what my question is.
Thank you. We could do one of two things or both. We do plan to come back to you, as noted, December 14th. So if you wanted to make notes, et cetera, and on your copy in red or something, and bring those to the meeting of the 14th, that would be great. Also, if there's some critical, issue that is, formatting, something that doesn't need discussion, but needs, you need to alert us to something, I would ask that you go ahead and email that to me. We can, I can collect anything that comes forward in the next month and ship that over to Christina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're definitely accepting written comments, whether in an email to Amy or marked up copy that you want to hand over, or verbal comments at the next meeting that we attend.
So I'll lead off then. I think Roger's suggestion about numbering the title pages is a really good one. I had the same problem.
Okay, great.
On the map that you've created, which I am very appreciative of, when I first looked at it, I couldn't understand why the building dates of these tracts were so haphazard, and then I realized you've listed the tracts alphabetically. I wonder if you could sort that by, also provide a map sorted by date so we have a sense of the oldest and the youngest. And I'm not sure how complicated that would be. It's probably just sorting the list, tract name list.
We do have a table of the tracks where we've tried to find the architects. We haven't been able to, I think it's at the end of chapter 2. Let's see.
End of chapter 2.
Where was that?
Which is what page?
Well, I can't find it now, but I'll see if it was organized by year for that one. I just found it. It's on page 40. Oh, and I just saw a typo. This also looks to be ordered by in alphabetical order, so that's a
Right.
great comment, thank you.
What's really helpful is to see, as I was looking at the map, I was most interested in where the first tracts or the first clusters, I think, is a better term, were built.
I can, if I can just kind of follow up on that, I think that's a great idea to show it chronologically. And what you could do, I've done this in the past, is you do like a gradient shading, so you can see going, from light to dark. And that kind of provides like this geographic context as well, and see where they're coming from. But I like that idea a lot.
So it'd be an additional,
Yeah, I would kind of visioning it as like just another map, same one, but just doing maybe a color scheme to show the order in which the neighborhoods were built.
In the Professorville guidelines, they do, your firm did shade the buildings by era.
Eras,
Not
yeah.
quite by date of when they were built, but I think they clustered, they identified them as by design. Anyway, I think it would, I'm not trying to push another page in here, but I think that's important. I'm wondering about the setback. Did you look at average setbacks on these Eichler houses? It looks, I mean, my intuition is that they're about 25 feet from the property line.
I believe we did.
It seems to me that one of the most important parts of the Eichler neighborhoods is the streetscape. You can't really get into a person's house unless you're invited, but everybody can see the architecture from the street. And it's really startling how many different design patterns there are, and you've done a really excellent job of bringing that out. I'm wondering if there shouldn't be effectively a facade easement, a suggestion, or even an ordinance that will preserve what the public sees. What you do in your backyard, I'm less concerned about, although I am concerned about the impact on neighbors. But it's really the streetscape that we're trying to preserve, because that's the part of the public history we can see. Last comment, two comments. One, it seems to me in reviewing this, and also as part of the Professorville Guidelines review, that single-story review is critically important in these neighborhoods where there is an historic designation. Because if you lose, if single-story buildings are not included in discretionary review, somebody can go in there and build any style of architecture, and this begins to bleed off the critical mass that makes an historic district important. And at the past Palo Alto Stanford Heritage Board meeting last night, one of the board members had mentioned that one of the Eichler districts is worried about losing their historic district status because they've had so many infill projects. So I'm not sure how to move this forward in terms of ordinance, but it seems to me that that's something that the council ought to consider. And I'm not sure how it would fit into this process, but it could be a recommendation from staff, or it could be a recommendation from our board. Last item, again, I don't mean to be picking apart your timeline, your public hearing timeline, but I'm wondering about the advisability of having the Historic Resources Board evaluate and move this forward in the legislative process before the end of the public comment period. So there'll be pretty much a month from today, that we'll be looking at it, but the public comment period goes on a month beyond that. And I worry about the impression that we're racing to judgment before the public comment period ends. I would have felt somewhat more comfortable having our meeting after the public comment period ended. Now, I understand all of the complexity about that, but I'm just saying that I'm a little bit uncomfortable about that.
I'll just say, originally, we had the meeting set up for November 28th. I think I announced that. But there was a conflicting rail meeting that came up, and so we had to cancel it and change our plans and put it off into February. Yeah.
I understand, there's nothing else going on in the city but historic preservation review. But nonetheless, it's a perception issue more. It's not that we could come back as a board and incorporate any comments that come after our meeting, but I just think that's problematic. Anyone else have a comment about this? Michael?
Just one comment. I was glad to see that on page 31 that you do recognize the fact that Eichlers are basically an extension of Frank Lloyd Wright's Usonian houses. Yeah. And, you know, Wright, the Eichler was really designed as a low-cost version of the Usonian house for the working man. And it would be nice to have a little example of a Usonian house and how the Eichler derived from the Usonian house. Just a little picture right there, that how they relate one to the other. But Wright was greatly influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright, and that's the genesis for all these Eichlers is Frank Lloyd Wright.
Brendan?
Yeah, one question. I think it looks good overall. I'm going to go through and mark up some comments at a later date. One question I had, I don't know if it's a particular issue as far as from the front facade, but my observation from Eichlers before is, being in them with friends, is they have very prominent chimneys on the inside. And I noticed on the page 71 about the chimneys, there's a discussion about seek strategies to structurally stabilize the chimney. My understanding is there's ordinances now with the city where you effectively can't touch brick and mortar chimneys to stabilize rather than replace because there's concerns about wood burning. So it'd be good to get clarification at some point on what that is. So you can't get a permit to stabilize because they encourage people to tear down and rebuild if it's for air quality. So.
And earthquake safety.
Sorry? Yeah, no, sorry,
earth-
it's the replace rather than repair because of the wood burning and because of earthquake safety. There's a lot of concerns around doing that, so I'm just wanted to kind of throw that in. Again, I don't think there's a lot of front, but I noticed this because they're very prominent on the inside, these huge, ceiling to wall fireplaces. So I don't know if we can come back with any info on that.
Yeah, there is no repair of an existing masonry fireplace.
You literally have to
It's
tear it down.
Yeah, because it doesn't have enough steel in it. It's not built to current standards. And they probably need pointing, if you could get into the flue and seal that again, that would be useful, but most likely, the city building department has no interest in trying to patch together an old fireplace.
I guess the comment on that I would have is the good news is there's only, one Eichler tract that has chimneys facing the street. So from the public standpoint, that won't be as much of a problem as far as the look of the, but yeah, we should get a handle on that. Thank you.
Okay. Beth?
Is there any mention in here of the problems with the heating coils that were put into the cement?
Yes, we do have a guideline or two that have to do with the slab heating.
There's a terrible example of adding heating and cooling to the top of an Eichler building near the Eichler Edgewood Plaza, and it's astoundingly bad. It's probably 2.5 feet above the roof plane. It totally ruins the Eichler design lines, and it's just lazy, in my opinion. It could have been made much smaller and flatter, but I don't know. It's something you've addressed here, I presume?
We do have a guideline that discusses adding mechanical or other things to the roof, whether it's HVAC or heat or otherwise. I think we just say that to try to keep it as low as possible so that it's not particularly visible.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I was going to mention something. So I was just kind of thinking beyond the guidelines and how this sort of impacts our community and things. And I was wondering, because we're always talking about incentives, could there be any creative incentives just for Eichler, people who want to preserve their Eichler? Maybe we can keep that in mind as, in further discussions to make it kind of give them some incentive so they feel somewhat rewarded for preserving what they have. And then also I was wondering, now that these are becoming more of a historic structure, would we want to think about coming up with a plaque? Like, in Professorville, we have those really neat plaques on the houses. Maybe we come up with a different look, maybe not the oval plaque, but maybe something square or something, I don't know. But I think that could be kind of a neat idea, because it really makes it more, that contributes to the sense of community, the sense of preservation. I know a lot of people don't like those plaques on their houses, but I don't know, maybe some people, the Eichler people would like that. I don't know, just an idea.
All right. Council,
More question? I have a client who's started out doing a new home. They're right off Charleston. And I'm looking through here to see in the guidelines for new homes. And looking on, I guess it's page 81 in that area, there's a checkoff on a house that's okay, and it's got a continuous wall of second floor in the back behind the, I guess, I don't know, beyond the existing Eichler. And then over on the other side, I guess it's the little glass window, but, so you're encouraging this shape of home for new homes or second floor additions on page 81 in the lower left-hand side? It's got the little green arrow.
We have guidelines that discuss pushing second-story additions back from the street and things of that nature. So I think this image is an example of somebody who's done that in the neighborhood.
But this is the section that someone who's going to do a new home looks forward for guidance?
This specific section is on second-story additions to existing Eichlers.
But I'm assuming if you're doing a new home, you'd have to look at this section.
5.1, the title to this section is New Additions to Existing Eichler Residences. And then I think later, 5.2 is New Home Construction within Eichler neighborhoods.
Okay.
And then we have a couple of photo examples of new homes on page 84. They both happen to be one story, which is generally what we're recommending, but we're not excluding second-story homes.
But, I mean, are you saying you can do two-story homes, or are you saying?
Yes.
And this is the guideline that you'll refer to? Well, I'm not sure that's enough guidelines. Maybe there needs more sketches or something. For the average person to look at this, essentially you want the back half of the house to be, if it's two-story, in the back part, not toward the front, is what you're saying, I think. Is that?
That image was for an addition to an existing Eichler.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to say, is there guidelines in here that has sketches of new homes and how they might work or not work, or have anything? Because, the Eichlers are great homes, but they're not so well holding up at this age point. They're getting lots of problems, and people would like to rather do a new home than refurbish one that's, heating doesn't work and all these kind of things. The windows are
Right.
double pane.
We've mostly included photos of buildings in the neighborhoods that we found to be more successful examples of new home construction within Eichlers versus using illustrations of potential design. But we do recommend not a historicist design, but using a modern vocabulary to be more compatible with Eichlers, using certain
And that's
Roof
here
forms.
in the book here?
Yes, it's all under 5.2, and there's 5.2.1 through 5.2.8. So there are 8 different recommendations for new home construction.
Okay, but I'm not seeing,
There-
there's no
Yeah, there's no.
visual.
Right, there's no
It's all
visual.
writing.
It's descriptive.
Well, even our guidebook for regular homes has got more detail, so.
So what I'm hearing, Roger, is that you're saying like the IR guidelines, it has, don't do this, do something more like this in drawn elevations. Is that what
I
you're
think
saying?
it would
You'd
be a
like
big-
something like that?
People reading this aren't, they don't know what a
So-
fascia board is and
So there's a possibility that we could modify the IR guidelines to have, a whole couple of pages on Eichlers with those types of drawings.
actually, that would probably be a good idea because it might actually encourage more people to build Eichler-type homes instead of the more modern homes. I don't know. I'm just trying to say, the average person looking through here is going to do a new home, and it's a lot of words. So
Right.
it doesn't, in this kind of world, that you need more visual, I think.
Right, so for those who are
You're right.
choosing to do a new two-story home, they're going to have to go through the IR guidelines. And this is to supplement that.
That would
And
be
it has
good.
guidelines written, but it's possible we could,
Sorry to add more
Yeah.
work to you, but I just,
well,
it's the
won't
job.
happen immediately, but
Yeah, okay.
We're exploring that anyway, updating the IR guidelines to include
'Cause, you
some
know, when we-
Eichler specifics.
When we do new homes, we always meet with Arnold. I suppose Arnold will have a lot of this under his, packet of ideas, so he will be a big help. So, okay.
All right, Councilmember Holman had a comment.
Yeah, just a couple of suggestions. First, thank you for getting this far. It's a lot of work, and Page and Turnbull is very accomplished at how to do these, so they're very clear and laid out very well. Just a clarifying thing, maybe as Roger had mentioned, putting the chapter number on the cover page, I think, or the chapter page. I think it's also maybe good to put them at the chapter pages themselves. Otherwise, you're looking like this, and people who aren't familiar, there are pages that don't have any 4.2.3, so you don't know what chapter you're in when you look, so just adding the number up here would be helpful. Page 17, and obviously we just got this at Places, so there hasn't been time to review it. Page 17 talks about repairing and replacing windows and doors, but all the language there is about replacing windows. I don't see anything about repairing or retaining. So that's one comment, and windows are such a huge, big deal. That's something I caught to begin with right off. I really do concur with the chair's comments about the review process in terms of sequencing. There's currently no architect on the Planning Commission, and I think if the Planning Commission doesn't benefit from an action item of this body reviewing this document after they've had a chance to review it, I think there's going to be a lot of confusion and back and forth and discontinuity in terms of intention and progress. So I think it's going to lead to maybe the community and very likely the council being like, well, what do we, So it seems like it'd be a lot more effective to have a December 7, if that date could be arranged without changing the Planning Commission meeting. We look at December 7 to have an HRB meeting. That's ARB date? Okay. Well, I would really strongly suggest, for everybody's benefit, to have this body have a chance to review this document and make comments in an action item setting prior to it going to the Planning Commission. Again, especially because there's nobody there with preservation experience and there's not even an architect there. A couple other just quick comments is, as the questions, I appreciate the questions and comments from the board members. One thing that's about Joseph Eichler, I really appreciate the history that's in here about how he stood for no discrimination. I mean, he was really a visionary and and a social leader in that regard. Might consider adding in there even to the extent that he resigned or was expelled, I've forgotten which, from the, what was it, the state construction board or something like it's that information's available, but it went that far that he was no longer part of that body because they would not include his discrimination policies. The other comment is, if I understand, and again, this is not from having read this, it's from just hearing comments and questions, that someone could build a new 2-story home in Green Meadow, well, no, not in Green Meadow because that is a single-story overlay, but somebody could build a new 2-story in any Eichler neighborhood, according to these. Okay. And so what it seems like would make sense is either in parallel with this or as a part of this, how neighborhoods could apply for National Register status. And the other thing, before you go, I know you have an answer ready, but the other thing is replacement of even single-story homes in the National Register districts, because right now they get no city review, but they are listed on the National Register. 2 neighborhoods are listed on the National Register, there's no review. So I heard the chair say that some people are concerned, I think it was you, who said some people are concerned about even the eligibility for the National Register because of how much change is happening in the neighborhoods. So as I've listened to the neighborhood over the last, the neighbors and community over the last couple of 3 years, they want to see not only the character retained, but they want to see the National Register status of their neighborhoods retained too. So how would this possibly get them there?
The guidelines themselves wouldn't. That is why there's a 2-part program here to get these guidelines before the council, in addition to the potential code modifications that the council could then direct to go forward. There's a menu of possibilities. There's Eichler overlays. There's independent development standards that could be added. There's a host of things, and so we're working on those as the potential for the council to direct to move forward after they get a good handle on what those options are.
So I was understanding the community, what they were looking for actually is these, yes, but I thought what the community was looking for was Eichler overlays.
Yeah, we've heard that from some, not from everybody.
I heard it from a lot.
Sure, but people come talk to you because they want that. There's other people that don't want that actively. So we have the whole host of residents that have interests, and we need to bring those forward to that's one of the reasons the community workshop is pushed off until next year, is because we are working on these potential code changes. And when you bring up the National Register tracts, I mean, because they're not listed on the city's inventory, they're not protected by our city ordinance. So that's hasn't even been identified in these potential code changes that we're working on, was modifying the historic preservation ordinance, which is always a hot topic. But yeah, that's another ordinance that has been long overdue to be modified. We talk about it here, categories 3s and 4s and 1s and 2s, those are all in the ordinance. That would be a change if you wanted to say there's only category 1 and 2, one's significant, one isn't, or one's just contributing. Those kinds of changes would have to come forward and, to the Planning Commission, to the council.
So I guess the question, to make it not a many years long process, is could those opportunities, suggestions, hindrances, whatever, come forward to the community in parallel to this, so they're like not looking at this and going, this is what we get, when some might want one thing and some might want another thing? Could they come in parallel to each other? So again, we're not extending this out several years.
Yeah, we're not interested in years. We're interested in months. And what we're interested in is getting these guidelines to the council for adoption. We're also interested at the same time getting to the council the menu of, direct staff to go forward with, A, B, and C. So that's going to be a council decision. We're going to come forward with proposals after having vetting those with the planning commission. It was going to be, December 14th to start talking about those, and now we'll push that off to January. It seems like that's an interest. So that will be, something that comes to the council in March to direct staff to then resume and go forward for the next, 6 months to get it done.
Hopefully while I'm still on council. And thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments, I encourage board members to forward their concerns or any suggestions to Emily, Amy, so we can have them included before we meet to discuss this as a board. So if there's no further discussion about this, let's do some housekeeping and move on with the day. I do not see any members of the public here, let alone members who would like to speak, so I think we don't have any public comments. Yeah. Approval of minutes. I wanted to suggest that, let's see, the minutes from October 12th. I noticed this is when we were first looking at Eichler guidelines. In the minutes, I think there is a place where I'm discussing the CCNRs of Green Meadow, and in the literal translation that came out as CCNRS. So I think that's a,
What page are you?
well, it's on many pages. You can see it on
Oh, it's
21.
Okay.
You can see it basically, if you do a keyword search on that,
Okay.
every single place that CCNRs are mentioned, it is, it's put as N instead of, what is that? Ampersand, is that the correct term? Yeah. Okay, other than that, I don't have any corrections. Anyone else have corrections? I don't see any. I'm sure we've all read these thoroughly. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second? Okay, Roger, you're seconding? All right. All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. All right, subcommittee items. This is the first draft of the Mills Act. It came, Emily sent this out to the subcommittee members. It is a draft because we haven't looked at it and reviewed it, but it's a very impressive document. Thank you very much. I second Councilmember Holman's comment earlier that you are a rare find, and we are very lucky to have your energy and intelligence and thoroughness in the city. So the subcommittee will meet again, I think, in the next couple of weeks to try to move this forward. But this is a huge improvement, and this is why we've never been able to move this idea forward. Just the discussions the subcommittee had didn't begin to cover the amount of information that's in this document. So I think we're actually able to move this forward next year. I don't think there are any other subcommittee reports, are there? Roger?
Yeah, I have a subcommittee. Has anyone been down off California Avenue lately along the railroad tracks? Where Fry's is? If you start down the Fry's and you go toward California Avenue, there's now all the big buildings that are already done, and there's 2 or 3 new ones going up. I mean, that's going to be one continuous wall. It's really, it's an amazing sight. And then they're going to start doing that new building. When's that going to start? That's going to have the parking and everything. It's just one busy place. It's amazing.
Listen, that's an art, blame the architects for that.
Yeah, right. And just for the notice that I used to go to Keeble and Shuckett all the time for all my cameras and stuff like that. Of course, they went away, and then the arts and crafts people had to move out because that building, they got changed. So now they're going to be in part of old Keeble and Shuckett building. And I mean to go down there because it's going to be divided, I think, into 2 or 3 spaces. So California Avenue is a real hopping place. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Any other comments, board members? All right, hearing none, and there aren't any announcements, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion?
Oh, everyone moved to adjourn. All right, all in favor? Aye. Good. See you next meeting.